Welcome in to another episode of Betting the Pitch. I'm your host, the real_G Warner. This is a baseball episode for the American League and National League Championship Series. Thank you for your support as always. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review and I will answer anything that you have on there. Questions, read your comments, whatever you're looking for. I will take care of it. If you are on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're on Patreon, awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you for all the support. If you're not a patron just yet, check out patreon.com/real_G Warner, the best spot to really get all my picks coming in throughout all the various sports for handicapping every day on a nightly, mid-nightly, late nightly basis. Of course, you get my leans, my write-ups, everything there before you see them on Twitter or other places. So check that out. Patreon.com/real_G Warner. It's a very nice price, especially if you subscribe other places. And you get a little bit more in a different type of fashion as well. All lines going in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the podcast description, the link in the podcast description to fund your account. Use the promo code GW50 to receive a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. So going to come out and go through the series prices here. For the AL and NL. Not a lot to cover, so it should be a pretty brief episode, but I'm trying to go in depth and kind of give you my, I guess, 15 seconds or so, probably more than that, as I'm a tad bit loquacious. Trying to get through as much as I can, and then we'll see how accurate I was or inaccurate I was. Had a really great end to the division series after a pretty slow start to the playoffs. Trying to keep that going and avoid those really, really awful when you're on a date, blown saves, when your entire group chat's blowing up and you thought you had won the Phillies bet, which unfortunately Monday night did not come through. Anywho, so let's get into it. Of course, using BetOnline odds. I'll get into the series prices first, and then I'll look at the game one lines, which we should have for both of the matchups here. So BetOnline has a lot of props. Actually, we have MVPs options, which I might go through a little bit later. I guess I clicked on series props accidentally instead of series. So let's start here. The home teams should be favorites in both. So we'll start with Sunday's matchup, which is the Rangers and visiting the Astros. A nice little Texas series. Should be a lot of energy in the ballparks. And if anyone has a ticket to any of the games in Arlington, let me know because I would love to be there. And I feel like I do not want to fight a battle against the StubHub secondary market because those tickets are going to be very expensive. Anyway, so the Rangers are plus 120 underdog right now. Astros a minus 140 favorite. I've been meaning to log this, but I've actually my first time looking at the numbers are right now live with you all. Or maybe not live if you're catching this afterwards, but regardless, this is the first time I'm looking at it. And my initial thought is the Astros with home field advantage. Of course, it makes sense that they're favorites. Does this price seem a little bit respectful of the Texas Rangers? I think it does, but at the same time, they've deserved it based on how well they've played so far. I think since I'm an underdog player or really in futures, I don't really do too much with anyone that's not getting odds. So it's really Rangers or nothing. And I guess I might as well go for the macro of these teams before I go into the game by game, I guess, reasoning. But my issue or my concern, and has been this way for a long time with the Rangers, is that they have no bullpen that you can trust. Didn't really seem to bother them so far as they haven't lost a playoff game yet. 2 sweeps, one on the road at Tampa and one both on the road and one game at home against Baltimore. Both teams that were kind of limping into the playoffs, a lot of issues in the Rays dressing room or locker room or everything was going wrong there. And then in the Orioles locker room, I think they weren't the same team. They'd missed a lot of players. Their closer was gone. And I think that was a pretty significant issue for them. Regardless, the Rangers still had to do it. And they're here. But my concerns are what we pretty much saw in game 3, despite I think a 6-1 lead. Aroldis Chapman coming in and walking everybody. And he can get really wild, and he is their second best reliever at this point. If he would have been their best, if not for really kind of falling out lately, falling out of bed, you could say. And that's kind of been taken over the closer role by Jose Leclerc, who was supposed to be the closer coming into the season. Lost the job because he was so bad, got sent to the minors. It was really horrible. But nice thing is that a baseball season, 6 months long, you play 162 games, and however many playoff games it takes to get there. So he's somehow come back and taken that job back again, which is awesome. And the Rangers very much needed, because they didn't have any sort of reliable right-handed pitchers. I still don't really think they have much in their bullpen, because they have former closer Will Smith, who's really not really working at all. Looks like a seventh inning guy at best, but could be less preferred to Brock Burke, which is not surprising. But that's another lefty, and then Chapman. So that's three lefties. A lot of lefties in there. The problem is the Astros are a very right-handed lineup, and the Rangers from the right-handed side, Jose Leclerc, Josh Sborz, who is a gas can at times, has some good numbers, and it's one of Bochy's favorites. For the manager, Bruce Bochy's favorites. Can't explain that because he blew a lot of games. Did get out of some really tough situations, but was also kind of responsible for putting himself in some of those. Besides an extra inning game that he played really well or pitched very well in Minnesota, that I remember. That's a big concern for me. The Astros bullpen on the other side is not as strong as we're used to it being. I don't think Brian Abreu's given up a run in like 3 months or something like that. But besides him, I still feel like the all curveball strategy from closer for the Astros is name is escaping me as we speak. But ultimately, Ryan Presley, there we go, before I even type it in. He's really just went curveball on every pitch, even 3-1 to, I pretty much remember it, to Max Kepler, who's like, no way he's throwing a curveball here. That eventually they're going to sit in a curveball, I would suspect. And the Rangers really got to this point because it hit the ball really well. Besides Abreu, I mean, the Astros, certainly Abreu being their kind of all-star pitcher that can go anywhere, seventh, eighth inning, high leverage guy, essentially getting the top of the lineup, I think does a lot more magic. It works a lot better. And then you can save Presley for the ninth inning, though you probably don't want him to get the top of the order. You could prefer any sort of other section of it. Hector Neris has been pretty good, and the Astros bullpen as well, but certainly can be a little wild, especially if you remember his time in Philadelphia. He's stabilized, been pretty good when not in the closer's role in Houston. But then when you think about the lineups, Houston has not hit as well this season as I think a lot of us expected, especially they hit last season and winning the World Series. And they do have that pedigree from getting through a lot of series and winning World Series, whether they're cheating or not. They've done it before. They've been at this stage. The Rangers have not, but the Rangers have clearly not been bothered by the playoffs, as they haven't lost a game yet. When I look at rotations, Jordan Montgomery is probably pitching as well as anyone for the Rangers. After him, though, I really don't know if Max Scherzer is going to make an appearance. If he is, I expect to be on the Astros in some sort or some form or fashion, maybe on over. I don't really expect Max Scherzer to do much. He's been out of commission for too long. Same you could say for John Gray. Dane Dunning's been all right, but ultimately is a deception pitcher, so that's a concern. When I think of other Rangers starters, potentially, I mean, Andrew Heaney in a bullpen piggyback type of scenario, but that I imagine would involve Dane Dunning as well. There's a lot of issues in the Rangers rotation, though. If you flip it to the Astros side, Verlander starting game one against Montgomery should be a pretty good pitching matchup, but then it kind of falls off a cliff from there. Farmer Valdez has not been great this season, got hit pretty hard by Minnesota, which is a surprise, but ultimately it did happen, and the market did not like him going into that one. Other starting pitchers, Hunter Brown's been moved to the bullpen, and it feels like there's a good chance. I mean, Urquidy was really good against the Twins, but there's a huge step up in lineups against the Rangers here. So I'm pretty concerned about the Astros starting pitching, more concerned probably about the Rangers, but there are issues in both of those areas, which makes me think that overs might be a little bit better of a play or something to kind of think about going into a lot of these matchups. But from my humble perspective, I feel like this is going to be a toss-up series, which maybe makes that plus 120 and the Rangers look a little bit better. I'm going to do the same now for the National League and then get through game one lines, come out here with the best bet. So the D-backs on the road at the Phillies should be pretty big underdogs, considering they're the 6th seed. Phillies were probably one of the strongest teams, but maybe were the 3rd best, despite getting the 4 seed because they didn't win their division, but took care of the Braves, should have swept them ultimately, if not for that late two-run home runs in the, I think, 7th and 8th innings. And brutal bad beat for anyone who played along with me on the Phillies that day, because that should have been a win. But regardless, we did get the last 2 from that series, so that was nice. Phillies are minus 190 favorite, which is pretty, I mean, it's a lot. I don't know if it's necessarily like too big. I don't think I have, unfortunately, I don't think I have numbers for the last series on the NL side. I don't think. I wish I did. So if the Phillies are a minus 190, then it comes back, returns. the D-backs plus 165, which is, I mean, I do have the NL from last. So the Dodgers were minus 225 favorites. So you get 35 cents cheaper, about 30 cents cheaper in terms of the D-back series price. They're nearly 2-1 underdogs the last time I looked at it before the division series started when I record this. And the Phillies were plus 160 underdog to the Braves. So that I gave that out. Hope a lot of you followed along with that. Pretty much the Phillies were a godsend to that series, I got to say. But from here, the D-backs, I mean, it's hard to, I don't blame anyone playing for the D-backs or playing the D-back series price because they've done so well here. I think the D-backs, really, it's hard to explain how they've done it. Bullpen's very weak. They've gotten away with it. Had the huge blowout against the Dodgers in game 1, and then I guess won some fairly close matchups in game 2 and 3. Game 3 being the closest, but they did what they needed to do. The bullpen survived. They're going to get another really tough test, having to go through what I thought was a pretty good Milwaukee team, though weaker than the rest of the 1 and 2 seeds, of course, the division winners, and then also the Phillies. Most likely, I think the Phillies would have been favored, even with Milwaukee being the home, likely having home field advantage. We don't have any of that in this round, unfortunately, but the D-backs have played really well. But what the D-backs, and what's really set them apart, they're a young team and they're solid. They got a long lineup. Doesn't really seem to be very top heavy like a lot of these lineups seem to be. Spend a lot of money on 3 or 4 big hitters and then kind of fill in with about average guys. The D-backs look to be, partly because they're such a young team, they have guys on rookie contracts. They've been able to spread out that lineup and make it a little bit harder. I don't like they bunt so much. I don't like that they kind of lack home runs, though they pretty much, Lance Lynn was serving up home runs to anyone, it seemed. From a Phillies perspective, they're going to try to hit the ball over the wall as much as they can. Certainly at home, they're in a much better place to do that than in Arizona, because I think it's really hard to get into the power alleys and into, hitting the ball into the seats. But there are a lot of bloop hits that happen in Arizona. It's not really Phillies game. So maybe there's some value potentially in the Diamondbacks when they're at home. Should have a huge home crowd in front of them, behind them. And then ultimately, I think the Phillies might be favored in some of the matchups there. Especially after looking at the game 1 line just briefly, just a few seconds ago. I think the D-backs were the strongest is probably that long lineup. The rotation was Zach Gallen leading off in game 1. He's awesome. Merrill Kelly's been really good at times, though not getting a ton of respect. So there could be some value on him. Brandon Pfaadt doesn't really seem to be good enough, but has been getting results, and hard to argue with that. And then the D-backs bullpen is a concern. Now, on the Philly side, Nola and Wheeler are probably the best 2 starting pitchers on a team in this playoffs. Maybe Verlander and Framber Valdez when they're at their best, but they really, neither of them have been this season. Phillies also want to hit the ball over the wall, and they've got a really, really big high velocity bullpen, which is going to be really hard for anyone to string hits together against. Of course, they can be wild. Of course, they can hang curveballs, hence that real meltdown that happened a few games ago in game 2, I believe, which really prevented Philadelphia from sweeping the series. But I think Phillies look like a stronger team to me here. I think in soccer betting the pitch style on this podcast, I usually try to pull one thing from each of the leagues and then pick a best one at the end. So I guess I'll do that here from the futures as well. I feel like the number is longest on the D-backs. That's obvious. Anyone that can do math or think about gambling in any sort of generalization. And I really have 2 options here, and that's the Rangers as underdog or the D-backs as underdog. I just don't think that favorites are really worth it in this type of situation. Not that you're tying up money for too long, because these series should wrap up within a week. But ultimately, I'm looking for the plus money side of things. And I feel like there's enough of a gap between the Phillies and D-backs. It certainly could happen. The playoffs are wacky, but I think I'll go with the Rangers as my best bet, plus 120 from the series prices, best bet angle at least. And now I'll move to game 1 lines for going a little bit more deeply and a little bit more in the standard way. I've been doing this all season. And then we will come out with an ultimate best bet at the end of the show, and then get the heck out of here and get ready for a weekend. And finally, there's not really much going on Friday night. First time in a long time, ever since the baseball season started, really. So I'll start in game 1 in looks like in Houston. The Texas Rangers visiting the Houston Astros. Jordan Montgomery at Justin Verlander. I'll give you what I made these lines, since there's only 2 of them. We can see how off I was. I made Montgomery a plus 118 underdog on the road with a total at 7 3/4. And it looks like my total is very low. This is the thing that you don't like to do, but here we are. In terms of, I guess, actual numbers, we opened with the Astros the minus 140 favorite, so coming back plus 120 on the Rangers' other side. The over-under at 9, juice to under. Since then, it's fallen to 8.5, which is still far above what I was expecting. Which I guess you're potentially going to see a lot more fighting for runs and a lot more moving base runners and potentially a little bit more high intelligence baseball. Not certain it's great for run expectancy, but here we are. Those numbers have moved or really just shrunken in below that 20-cent initial opener, which I believe is from Bookmaker probably. But BetOnline's got a minus 134 right now, dealing it for Houston, plus 123 coming back on Texas. And we got an over-under at 8.5, which is juiced over now. So I think there's some, I guess when I look to handicap this, I start to think from back to front. How is this game going to be closed? And my biggest questions are really on the Texas side is how they're going to close the game. Leclerc should get the 9th. Chapman should get the 8th or maybe in the 7th or something like that if they need a big arm to come in. And that's a big concern for me, especially having just given out the Ranger series price. I think from a Houston perspective, Justin Verlander has been really good, but not the same as he was winning the Cy Young last season. Left for New York, got traded back to Houston. He's probably, I think, more popular to a market point of view or a market standpoint, but Jordan Montgomery has been awesome. Lights out. Maybe not as great in the playoffs, but had a big lead and was essentially not walking anybody and was just trying to get outs and trading runs for outs and things of that nature. So I wouldn't be scared off by his stats not looking as pretty as of late. He's been really what has kept the chewing gum that was basically holding the Rangers together for a long time while they're getting their pitchers and their hitters that were out of the lineup back in some sort of health. I think there's a good possibility that Jordan Montgomery leaves with a lead against Houston. I mean, we've seen Texas basically jump out these big leads, which is the number one way for them to win games. So they don't have a good enough bullpen to hold on to close games or to win those type of tugboat races late with two teams tied, and they ultimately have a lot of scary parts to them. I think if you like Texas here, it's hard for me to want to. I mean, I guess you could see Montgomery and Verlander getting hit a little bit harder, but I still feel like that total is still pretty high. I don't know that I want an under with Texas, especially because if they go on the road and they're going to win, you got to trust that bullpen because Montgomery's not likely to go complete game here. Plus, you get Houston getting 9 at bats, and that's a lot of risk that you could potentially see extra innings. And they don't call it undertime for a reason. So, in trying to come up with scenarios here, I mean, I guess I'd like Houston if the price dropped a lot, but I'm not sure I'm in a position where I want to fade Texas right now in that lineup, especially not with Jordan Montgomery on the bump because I think he can outpitch Verlander. There might be some of an interest for me in that first 5 number on the Rangers. It probably is worse than that plus 123. Juices are a little bit, or the spread's a lot wider on the juices. I mean, plus 115 for a money line on the Rangers. First 5 is interesting to me. Maybe that plus 1/2 at minus 120 that BetOnline's currently dealing. I mean, that's a little bit more exotic than what I'm usually giving out, which is just size and totals. But I think first halves or the equivalent first 5 in Major League Baseball is still probably an acceptable thing to give out. So that's my interest right now. I think could see runs, of course, from either of these lineups. Could see either of these starting pitchers getting hit pretty hard. But I think the Rangers is probably where I want to go. I mean, it's nice if you could probably split it and do a plus 1/4 and have a little bit of plus money on the money line and get a little bit of that of your risk on plus 1/2. So if it's tied through 5 innings, you take home a little bit. But you also could go and kind of lay that juice and play the Rangers plus 1/2 of a run in that first 5. Also, you might not need to be that careful because it's a good chance that the Rangers get out to a big lead. But I think it's going to be hard to do, especially on the road. And I feel like tight series, really, we haven't seen a lot of them so far. I expect it to get a lot more nervy, a lot more really just, and I think the managers will be better about pulling people if they're starting to struggle instead of having what I thought was going to be a really short leash in a lot of these playoff games that was not short whatsoever. So that'll be my interest in that Texas-Houston game. We'll see if I make that an ultimate best bet. Move to game 1 of Arizona at Philadelphia. It looks like Gallen, and they haven't announced Wheeler yet officially, but I think that's pretty much confirmed. Looks like, so I made Zach Gallen a plus 133 underdog on the road. Over under I made at just below 8. Looks like the total opened 7.5 all the way juiced to under. So a lot more respect for the pitchers, and which does concern me in that small of a ballpark where home runs are everywhere. But from a side perspective, looks like Wheeler opened -165 with a +140 coming back the other way. That has been hasn't moved too much. We've Gallon a +142 underdog at Bet Online, only 13 cents to -155. So if you're not a member, check the description below to go get a 50% bonus. Use the promo code GW50 if you haven't signed up Bet Online. I haven't heard yet if it works for reloads, but if you are at Bet Online, then check below for sportsbetting.ag. Same type of rule, or use the promo code GW50 and get 50% free on your next deposit. Huge. And I would max that out as much as you can, get as much free money from casinos as possible to try to make our edge that much stronger. Anyway, back to this matchup. So Zach Gallen, he's lived on a lot of hard contact, which is not really a great thing, and kind of makes you think he's going to eventually, I guess, get hit by the BABIP monster, just get unlucky and have a lot of things fall in. But it's worked out for him fairly well. And I don't know that BABIP is really the Philadelphia mantra. They're essentially trying to hit the ball over the wall, and that is not considered a batted ball in play because they are not in play if it's a home run. So Gallen's going to try to strike guys out. I don't think he's been striking out as many, and I think that's going to be a little bit tougher of a situation. Gallen has immaculate control, probably the best in the bigs. But he's going to have to be really good against a really tough, raucous Philadelphia environment, which everyone's heard about the negatives of the Philly fan base, but they've been a huge boon to the Phillies the last couple of seasons in the playoffs. And I don't know if that's necessarily got them the World Series, but it certainly didn't hurt against Atlanta. And even when they're saying we want Strider, which I didn't think was going to go perfectly, but as a big underdog, they still cashed. So that was pretty nice, despite all the motivation to be on the Atlanta side. Regardless, Arizona, like I said, bullpen worries me. I think if you're going to play here, the price is too high for me on the Phillies. So it's Arizona or nothing. I think it'd be a similar type of theory for me, is that a first five would be more interesting to me. You got +155 on Gallen versus a +142 that's currently being dealt in the full game at Bet Online. And that first five numbers, +1/2 is even money on Arizona. The problem is you're fading Zach Wheeler in that scenario. And I think Zach Wheeler, after knifing through that Atlanta Braves and the and the Miami Marlins before that, I think at home, he's probably going to pitch very well against Arizona, which might make sense why this total is a little bit lower than I made it. I kind of might like that under 4 as first five bet, a way to back both of these pitchers. Of course, you got to be worried about the Philadelphia home run threat, but ultimately a lot of times they're not getting guys on base and those are solo shots. So that's something that's also very interesting to me. I think I might as well give it out and just list them all as my potential best bets and then get out of here with that ultimate best bet. So stick around for that. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a 5-star review. It's huge to get me up the search rankings and get more of these podcasts coming out, because the more people that are listening, watching, downloading, doing all those sort of things, liking, the more podcast episodes I'll do, because I think it's worth it. I think it's really good, at least for me, to get this out to you, and then people can ask me about it, question me on it, and that will all hopefully make us more money in the long run. So keep doing that. If you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out, patreon.com. So it's real_Warner. Patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. Sorry, long day. It was a long day in Kansas City yesterday, but we're back. We're back in the Metroplex and trying to find a way into one of these Texas at Houston games. But anyway, if you're not a member, if you're not a patron yet, check it out. It's a very, I think, affordable monthly price. And you get everything that you could ever want from me, probably more than you want. You get my leans every night. You get my plays as I lock them in. You get my write-ups as I'm thinking about things, and you can get all notifications. Turn your notifications on, download the app. You can get a buzz every time I put something in, lock something in, add a write-up, add a lean. And that might be the best way to follow up with me. So patreon.com/real_G Warner. And now it's time for the ultimate best bets. So let's get into it. Hey, this is real_G Warner, and this is Betting the Pitch MLB edition for the American League and National League Championship Series. So give out my best bets in the various series and first game categories, and then come up with an ultimate best bet at the end. For a series price, like the Rangers +120. In game one, I also like the Rangers getting that first five plus 1/2 of a run, minus 120 right now. And then in Arizona, Philadelphia, I like the first 5 under 4 runs in that matchup. And for my best bet, the ultimate best bet on this episode, I'm going to go with that first 5 under Arizona at Philadelphia. Under 4 right now, bet online, minus 115. So a little bit of juice. You might want to watch out on that. I don't think it'll fall below 4, but 2 great pitchers, Gallen with great control. Should be able to keep Philadelphia in the yard, while Wheeler should be able to get through a pretty weak Arizona Diamondbacks lineup that's been hitting well. But I think he's the perfect way to douse that fire. And that'll do it for this episode of Betting the Pitch. I thank you for all your support, of course, all this time we've been doing it. And I'll get this up. And then any questions, please leave a 5-star review. Anything, questions in there, I'll put those to the front of the line, add those in. And if you're not on Patreon yet, just check out patreon.com. So that's the real_G Warner. And now I'm gonna get out of here, and we'll talk to you later this weekend.